I've told you before, like in the first decade of my Christianity, how I thought I was enlisted in the holiness police. It was my job to make sure that all of my friends were going to stay in the kingdom. And the way I did it was I inspected their lives. What were they doing? How were they acting? What were they engaging in to make sure they were living up to this standard of holiness that I believe the Bible had called them to and that God had convicted me into in certain areas. Because when I was 16 years old, God had given me some personal convictions about things to do and things not to do that served me very well in that season for sure. And I'm not going to get into what exactly were these personal convictions, because I have learned over the years that good people have various opinions on these things. So I don't want to distract you from this message by telling you the specific things. But at the time, I thought that what God had told me about that was for everybody else, and I shoved it down their throat. And so what happened, especially in my college years, when I would be out with friends or I would hear about things that they were doing, something would just rage inside of me if they were doing what I was personally convicted against doing. I mean, it would really bother me. And it wasn't so much that I was concerned about their salvation. Understand, these were good people that loved the Lord. But what bothered me was that I had no control over their life, that they weren't listening to me. They weren't heeding my advice. So what happened? I suffered stress because of it. Maybe if I would have been more acquainted with Paul's words, I would have been in more peace and wouldn't have been ruling over people with such an iron fist in those days. Because Paul speaks very directly about how to handle putting personal convictions on people. And in this instance, he's speaking about eating and drinking, but I think we can apply this to a lot of things. Look what he writes to the Romans. 14, 1 through 4, he says, accept other believers who are weak in the faith, and don't argue with them about what they think is right or wrong. For instance, one person believes it's all right to eat anything, but another believer with a sensitive conscience will only eat vegetables. Those who feel free to eat anything must not look down on those who don't, and those who don't eat certain foods must not condemn those who do, for God has accepted them. Now, look at how Paul concludes his instruction here. Verse 4, who are you to condemn someone else's servants? Their own master will judge them whether they stand or fall, and with the Lord's help, they will stand and receive his approval. So he says their own master, and their master is not you. They are not your servants. God is their master, is what Paul is saying, and he is the one that's going to judge, and he's the one that's also going to help them stand. You don't have to do it. We are to have a personal account for ourselves. That's what he says just a few verses later in verse 12. Each of us will give a personal account to God, not an account for somebody else's life. You don't have to worry so much about how they are living, especially when it comes to personal kind of convictions. And just as a side note here, I really believe that when we do you suffer from feeling anxious, agitated, irritable, or overwhelmed? If so, you are not alone. Unfortunately, 3 out of every 4 Christians admit to these symptoms of stress. But more important than physical suffering, stress comes between our relationships with God. It hinders obedience to God, and it chokes out the fruits of the Holy Spirit in our lives. But you don't have to suffer from stress anymore. In my 4-part audio series, Stress Relievers, I alert you to the common ways stress sneaks into our lives and then guide you through practical strategies to kick stress out. If you're ready to rise above the pressures of today to experience the abundant life that God desires for your future, then don't wait. Go online now to kylewinkler.org and order my 4-part audio series, Stress Relievers, for a donation of only $25. Shipping and handling is included. This series includes 4 stress-relieving messages: living in your grace zone, busybodies, the easy way to trust God, and the place of God's delight. Don't let stress choke out the peace of God in your life anymore. Go to kylewinkler.org to get my Stress Relievers series on 4 CDs or MP3s for a donation of only $25 and get on your way to real rest and relaxation for your body and your soul.